You're listening to the Monocle Daily, first broadcast on the 17th of August 2026 on Monocle Radio.
The world's best universities named. Will there ever be a break on the transatlantic lock on the top 10? Are electric vehicles overhauling combustion engine heritage? And the hegemon of the interminable chart topper. I'm Andrew Muller. The Monocle Daily starts now. Hello and welcome to the Monocle Daily, coming to you from our studios here at Midori House in London. I'm Andrew Muller. My guests Mark Earls and Alex von Tunzelmann will discuss the day's big stories, and we'll hear from Nate Suarez, co-author of a new book attempting to warn that we may, as a species, presently be building the thing which will destroy us. Stay tuned, all that and more coming up right here on the Monocle Daily. This is the Monocle Daily. I'm Andrew Muller and I am joined today by Mark Earls, consultant on marketing, communications and behaviour change and writer of Herd, How to Change Mass Behaviour by Harnessing Our True Nature, and by Alex von Tunzelmann, historian, author and screenwriter. Hello to you both.
Hello.
Mark, last time you were here, you were going to go to Ireland to talk about hair care. You have now returned from Ireland where you talked about hair care. How did it go?
Well, it went as well as can be expected, given that I'm not an expert on hair care. But I did meet some lovely people. The island's
You can say that now, of course.
Of course, yeah. But they paid me, so I'm
You've
fine.
sent the invoice, yeah.
Yeah, and it's been paid. I'm happy with that. No, they were lovely people, and they were the island's leading salon owners who are wondering about how they can continue to charge people money for the expensive colour treatments that are essential to a lady's life.
And I mean, surely the answer is that people will still keep paying exorbitant amounts for these treatments, or are people not so keen anymore? This is a genuine question, not my area of expertise.
Neither mine, but it seems that about 70% of hairdressers in UK and Ireland are now working freelance and not in salons. So that's a big challenge to these business owners. So how do they get people to come to the salon to have this stuff done? Whatever else they may do. And I don't know if you've noticed, but YouTube now has just about any thing you want to do, it will show you how to do it very quickly for yourself without using any expert. So there's that problem for them as well.
Alex, you are about to do something which just sounds pleasingly 1970s jet set. You're going to Barbados.
I know. It is a bit sort of retro in that respect.
This is like having Princess Margaret on the show.
I mean, very similar, very similar. I mean, hopefully slightly less drunk at this point, and not smoking up in the studio. Yes, basically traded in all my air miles. Because I'm writing a book, I wanted to go somewhere where there wasn't too much to do. Mm-hmm. So the idea is every morning I'll do 2 to 3 hours of writing.
No, you won't.
We'll see how that goes. And then I'm on holiday after that.
I mean, this is of all the most self-deluded things I've ever heard from an author, Alex. This is, and I obviously include myself in that. That's up there. That is way up there.
Let's see what happens when I get back.
I'm going to go to a sunny Caribbean island and do a solid morning's work every day.
Possibly go wrong.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I look forward upon your return, Alex, to hearing read to us the 87 words you compose while you are there. But we will commence tonight's show with the ivy-clad halls of academia, as the numbers are in the ARWU, or Academic Ranking of World Universities. It is, as usual, dominated by the United States and the United Kingdom, between them filling all the top 10 places and 17 of the top 20. We will have more from our panel shortly, but first we're joined by Guy Standing, Professorial Research Associate at SOAS here in London and author of Human Capital, The Tragedy of the Education Commons. Guy, what is the United States and the United Kingdom's secret here?
Well, first of all, thank you for this, but I think rankings are for the birds, quite honestly. The fact is that millions and millions of dollars are spent on big universities in the United States and in Britain, and we experience a citations problem in that the rankings that are given are based on citations in prominent journals. And most of the prominent journals in most of the subjects are in the English language. and dominated very much by American journals. What is really interesting about these new rankings is how rapidly the Chinese universities are rising in the ranks. And it's led by, the one that's risen 3 places to number 18 this year. And Peking University has risen dramatically as well. And overall, the story of all of these rankings, because they're not the only rankings to take place, have shown that the Chinese universities, despite having far fewer resources and background in Mandarin and obviously other Chinese languages, are coming up. Now, Nature, the scientific journal, did a ranking in December last year of the top research universities in the world for material sciences. And the top 21 positions were Chinese universities. And that 59 of the top 100 were Chinese. And only 18 American universities got in. Now, in the course of doing the research for my book, I invited lectures in 155 universities, including most of the top American universities. And the reality is you have to agree with Elon Musk. I don't often agree with him, but he said that the American system is teaching mediocrity. And it's teaching it, but it has a transfer system, a bit like football teams. They pay huge amounts to celebrity researchers to get them to transfer to their universities. They hardly have to do any teaching at all. They're just paid for their names and for their citations. And we have a situation, I'm afraid, where the mediocrity of the leading universities is now coming together with some censorship. The biggest university in the United States, University of Texas, has just banned the teaching of Plato's Symposium to philosophy undergraduates. And we're seeing a real crisis in the quality of education. We're seeing a lot of churning. In the British case, we now find, as I've reported in my book, that only 40% of the tuition fees of undergraduates is actually spent on tuition.
So, Guy, is there potential
money is spent on recruiting and branding and things like that?
Is there then potentially an argument that rankings of this sort foster a certain amount of complacency among the big transatlantic universities, that they just think we are the top 20, etc., we'll be there forever?
That's precisely what's happening. And of course, you see banners at various universities that saying which rank they are and so on. But the reality is that the standards are going down. There are lots and lots of evidence that functional literacy is declining. The amount of time devoted to reading, the amount of time devoted to actual research is going down. And in the United States case, they've benefited from what's called the Bayh-Dole Act of 1980, which effectively said that any research done in universities, federally funded, government funded, could be turned into intellectual property and privatized. And that has given the American universities an incredible advantage, which has led to a collapse in research in major corporations in the United States. And finally, indicative of the actual decline is a huge number of the most successful entrepreneurs in the United States have dropped out of university because they weren't getting anything from being in university. That includes Sam Altman, that includes Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, most famously. They all dropped out because they weren't getting a good education. So I think these rankings are a bit of inertia, a bit of a fraud in the sense that they're basically saying those institutions that have most money and most access to journals will be in those top positions for a long, long time. But the interesting story, as I started my comments with, is that the Chinese universities are improving dramatically, and all over the world, academics like myself are recognizing that and feeling it. And it's very encouraging in a sense.
Guy Standing at SOAS, thank you for joining us. You can read an essay by Guy in the September issue of Monocle, which is on a newsstand near you on Thursday. Let's bring our panel back in. Alex, you probably haven't got any especially firm views on the subject of academia, I wouldn't have thought.
Oh, none that couldn't be switched around for a bit of extra funding. Yes, I mean, I sort of think the thing is about lists like this, I agree with Guy very much that actually this is a sort of system that can be gamed in a way. Mm-hmm. It's quite, however you assess it, there's always a kind of a bias towards a certain type of university that can game that system. And I think probably you could get a very, very good education at any of these universities or any other were you to put any effort into that yourself. Because one crucial point about university education is that by that point in your academic career, you have to be quite self-starting. And it very much depends what you put in. It's not like, school where they're going to push you through it. I mean, if you don't turn up, then you don't do the work. So straightforward and simple. You get AI to write your essays.
So you have pretty much described my own attempt at tertiary education right there. I didn't turn up and I didn't do the work and therefore dropped out twice.
You and Sam Altman.
Well, yeah, me and Sam Altman, peas in a pod. Mark, is there a thing, though, where the university's in the top 10 and it is the usual suspects? There's at least as much. It's not just about the education, it's about being able to say, as they always do, I went to university X, Y or Z.
Yes, I'd like to be able to say that too. I went to the University of Oxford. But, it is about prestige. That's what people are buying when they choose to go to a particular university. They sweat to get to there because it's a great marker of their success. Their parents are very proud, their family, their school. They win lots of prizes. It's wonderful. It's a prestige thing. And later on in life, it becomes important. Partly as a prestige marker, but also because you meet people that you might not otherwise meet at that point, and later on you will meet them again, and so you're part of a larger network. And this is the old boys club that we've often moaned about, I think.
But are standards, do you think, Alex, because this is in theory the important bit, is the actual education you get at one of these places. Do you subscribe to the view that certainly in this country that standards are slipping, and I guess certainly in the United States where you have seen the last decade or so dominated by an administration which is just outright hostile to universities?
I think that's quite a big issue. And actually the government in the UK is also very hostile to universities, which has been a consistent problem. For instance, insisting that foreign students need to go in the immigration statistics. If you were to remove those, universities could recruit a great deal more from overseas, thus funding themselves much more effectively for no cost to the British taxpayer. However, the government seems immune to this argument, I think because they have a sort of reflexive idea that universities are inherently elite. Of course, they've actually been, in the 20th century, one of the great engines for social movement, far from that. So there is a sort of strange thing where both the US and the UK, although they're still sort of these big institutions are at the top and, we can all kind of name them, there are actually a lot of good institutions at a lower level that I think are being starved by governments and sort of successively, and governments of the right and the left, actually, for their different reasons. I would also agree very much with what Mark said, that I think the prestige marker aspect is very important. I mean, you can get a fabulous education, as I said earlier, at really any university. If you've got a good tutor and if you invest your own time and effort, you can absolutely do that. But it's the people you meet if you go to Harvard, Stanford, MIT, Oxford, Cambridge, these sorts of places that I think often make the biggest difference to your social mobility.
And is that the reason, Mark, that despite the vast improvements, especially of Chinese universities, Chinese families who can afford to do so would still rather send their kids to school in the US or the UK? There's something like 150,000 Chinese students in the UK, for example.
I think that's exactly it. I mean, I live just the other side of UAL, the combined London Arts part of the University of London, and it's full of Asian students. It's full because it just makes financial sense for the university, and they're there because it's an incredible prestige thing that they can then take back whatever else they do with their lives, whether or not they ever leave China or Korea or wherever else again. They've done this thing in London at this prestige university.
Well, to China now, where the good times appear to be ebbing for Mercedes-Benz and other German car manufacturers who assumed that prestige would always be a contender against price. They are learning the hard way that where electric vehicles in particular are concerned, the cachet of a heritage brand seems to come a distant second to value, especially when Chinese EV manufacturers are catching up on quality. Mercedes-Benz recently tried to arrest the slide by partnering with McDonald's and promoting an image in which the three-pointed star on the bonnet of a CLA was replaced with a silver cheeseburger. Whatever benefit may have accrued to McDonald's, it did Mercedes-Benz little good. In the first half of 2026 in China, they shifted barely 1,100 new cars. Mark, marketing, etc., your department, are you astonished that sticking a hamburger on a car didn't work?
Astonished? No. So when I came across this story, I thought of the conversation, the phone call that was had from Stuttgart to Shanghai or wherever Mercedes-Benz China is based. So what were you doing? What did you think you were doing? We are Mercedes. We are one of the great prestige organisations in the world, great brands. We are about the ultimate in engineering. That's what we're just... Mercedes and McDonald's. Why did you think... Now, I know from a marketing practitioner's perspective that you want partners to go to market when you go into a place you've not got much established footprint. You want partners, people who will help you bring in new audiences. But McDonald's? Seriously?
Yeah, this does strike me as one of those instances. I mean, Mark mentions that there would have been a conversation, Alex. I find myself thinking a lot in all sorts of contexts about the fact that there's a meeting. There will have been a meeting. And it strikes me that a lot of meetings take place without that one person at the table willing to say, sorry, what?
I mean, it is, you can sort of imagine quite a comic scene, can't you? I mean, it really is a what were you thinking on this. I think, and this is a thing that also, I think, when you come to something like these car brands, I mean, actually, China is really making some excellent cars now. If people want a quality car in China, there's plenty of very, very good, well-made local brands they can buy. I think with Mercedes, with any kind of imported brand like that, a European brand, American brand, anything that's high-end, surely the thing to do, and I mean, I'm sitting opposite a great marketer, but even to a Luddite like me, even to a sort of, completely non-marketing person like me, you think lean into that luxury, that prestige, the idea that this is exclusive, that it's high-end, that it's, a prestige foreign product, much like sending your children to Stanford or Harvard,
I think that's exactly right. I was thinking about my time working with drinks brands who were struggling when the Chinese market opened up, struggling with the idea of selling a $350 bottle of blend of malt whiskey to a Chinese audience who would mix it with green tea. And that's because they don't understand, they haven't bothered to understand the culture they're going into. So if you are a prestige brand, like Mercedes undoubtedly is in the rest of the world, you have to understand the culture you're going into. And what do they see as prestige and how can you use that? McDonald's sure ain't it.
But just to follow that up, Mark, are we reaching that kind of tipping point at which China itself is becoming kind of a prestige brand? Because I've certainly lived long enough, and I suspect you have as well, that I can remember when phrases like made in Japan and made in Korea were punchlines. Yeah. They were a joke. That was what you said when you wanted to suggest something was cheap and tacky and would fall apart. Those are both now absolute bywords for rock-solid quality. Are we seeing the same thing happening with made in China?
We are seeing the same things happen made in China, and it's when we move out things like apparel or things made of plastic. Engineering things, technology things are definitely moving that way. And what's interesting with the EV technology introduction is that it is a new technology which allows people to think differently about this.
And so they're not as wound up in the sort of heritage of Audi or Porsche.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're Audi and Porsche, you listen really, you tune the exhaust so that you can, this is the roar of the car, right? And this is something that if you don't have this, if you don't have that technology and you're selling something that doesn't have that roar, you're lost.
I mean, Alex, this is obviously pretty grim news for German manufacturers in China. Should they be starting to worry about what's happening in Europe? Chinese cars are now 14.2% of the European market and climbing. Should the EU just tariff the absolute bejeebers out of them in an attempt to save Europe's car manufacturers while they still can?
Well, tariffs are quite popular these days. I mean, that is a road they could go down. I think probably it's about leaning into what they do well rather than trying to cover every possible base. I mean, like I say, there are some very, very good cars being manufactured in China right now. The fact is, if you're just going on quality for price, they're probably going to do very well. But what can a Mercedes or another high-end car give you that can't? Well, certain prestige. Yes, the engineering ought to be brilliant. It ought to be working fabulously well. Perhaps a product built to last. Sort of luxury touches, leather seats, all of this sort of stuff. And I think, and probably also environmental benefits as well, I would say, is another big thing that could be looked at, because, with obviously a lot of European minds, particularly after this summer, possibly turning to environmental consequences of driving, perhaps people will think more about, paying a bit more for a car that has better eco-credentials, for instance, whether that's
Here's another thing that I think is fundamental to the German automotive industry, and a lot of European businesses and American businesses need to think about. Going into somewhere like China, you perhaps need to accept you're going to sell less. You're not going to be the majority player. You're not going to be the market leader. So if you're going to sell less, you need to sell it for more. And that's where the prestige and the reputation stuff is so important, and understanding the culture stuff. Don't go in there expecting that you're going to sell 30,000 CLAs if you're a Mercedes.
Just finally, Mark, if you are a prestige brand like Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Audi, Porsche, do you get kind of confined by that? Because it has occurred to me more than once, sitting in the back seat of a still miraculously functioning Mercedes-Benz in some of the least hospitable places you could possibly drive a car, that this is how I would sell Mercedes-Benz. The fact that their cars are the taxi of choice in places I've ridden in Mercedes-Benzes, Gaza, Lebanon, Libya, Mali, just extraordinary, difficult and dangerous places. And yet these cars, some of them built in the 60s and 70s, are still working.
I think that's a wonderful way to think about it. And, Land Rover have in the past done the same thing with their all-terrain. Toyota have done something with their SUVs as well. So I think it's a great idea. The thing is to actually probably sell less new. and not make it. The other flip side of that is to actually have scarcity, the old velvet rope thing. This is not available. We're not selling this to you. You can buy it from us under certain conditions.
Well, to the pop charts now, which on both sides of the Atlantic have been dominated in recent months by especially persistent number ones. In the UK, Sam Fender and Olivia Dean's Rain Me In has topped the pops for several million years. In the United States, Ella Langley's Choosing Texas has done much the same. More on this from our panel shortly, but first, here is Monocle's pop charts desk chief, Fernando Augusto Pacheco.
Rain Me In by Sam Fender and Olivia Dean broke an impressive record at the UK singles chart, topping it for 21 weeks. It is the UK's longest running number one single, and it's still there. I know a lot of people are playing it cool, saying they never heard of it, but come on, it's being played in supermarkets, taxis and so on. And you know what? I think it's a lovely, gentle song that deserves its share of success by two very talented British musicians. What's the secret of a number one song? That's the difficult part to decipher. The streaming era favors fewer hits, and they tend to stay on top of the charts for longer. Contrast that with the late 90s, early noughties, for example, where we saw a non-stop succession of different number one songs every week. One thing I'll tell you, Rain Me In was not necessarily a shoe-in to be the song of the summer. It was released over a year ago, and in many ways it had a spontaneous organic growth. It only reached the summit of the chart after 35 weeks. In the United States, another song had a similar level of success. It was another surprise hit. Ella Langley's addictive country track, Choosing Texas, still number one in the world's biggest music market for 17 weeks. It is already the fourth longest leading song of all time. As much as the algorithms try to dictate what we listen or enjoy, it warms my heart that the surprise hit didn't die. For Monocle Radio, I'm Fernando Augusto Pacheco.
She's from Texas.
Thank you, Fernando. Let's bring our panel back in now. Alex, I will now out myself as one of those people that Fernando insists are pretending they've never heard either of those songs. Until literally just then, I had not knowingly ever heard either of those songs. Does that demonstrate that, and I know this is not an original thought, but a number one hit's not what it was, is it?
I don't think it is, no. I mean, I do remember, being a child in the 1980s and everybody clustering around the TV to watch Top of the Pops and find out what was number one that week. And I think probably this is just an example of how those sorts of shared experiences when, you had scheduled television, 4 channels, this sort of thing, have basically disappeared now, that we do live in a world which is much... I mean, I couldn't tell you what's been Christmas number one for about the past 10 years.
Also, people used to have to physically go out and buy the record.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure streaming really counts.
Is it all just cheating?
Exactly.
Don't tell the PRS,
it's all
honestly.
cheating. I mean, Mark, this is not comparable, is it really, with Bryan Adams' Reign of Terror in 1991 or Wet, 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 similar thing in 1994. Those were respectively 16 and 15 weeks.
No, it's not comparable in the sense that we haven't suffered the same way.
No, because the point, there was no way of avoiding them.
There was no way of avoiding them, and I think it's partly because our culture has become, as you've suggested, Alex, much more diverse. There's lots and lots of stuff coming at us all the time. We don't have to engage with it. The internet and social world has enabled us to remove the friction of actually doing anything like going to shop or even paying for it. It just comes at us all the time. And so it doesn't count the same way, I don't think, in the impact that it has on the culture. What's interesting, the patterns underneath, statistical patterns, are still the same.
Did you know, Alex, that Reg Presley out of the Trogs, who wrote Love Is All Around, that Wet, Wet, Wet had that enormous hit with, spent some of the money researching crop circles?
Oh, good for him.
He's a fine man.
Well, what a wonderful use of a large unexpected fortune.
Exactly. Just a spectacular waste of absolutely everybody's time. See, the thing is with those number ones, Mark, and I don't know if this applies so much now because you can be just vaguely curious and press play and there it is. I do recall wondering during both of those hegemons of Bryan Adams and Wet, 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 who are the people who at about week 13 are going, you know what? I'm going to buy it. Yeah. I mean, did they suddenly get enthusiastic, or had their will just been broken?
I want to know too. There's a social scientist, Frank Batts, who demonstrated how things like this spread through populations over time, and he shows that it's about copying. And so we start with, we might have heard the terms of early adopter. So some people have to start somewhere. And then the next lot of people are people who've seen those people doing that thing or buying that song or singing that, and then they copy it. And then another bunch of people copy those people. And so by the time you get to week 13 of this kind of thing going, everyone else seems to be doing it. Everyone seems to be doing this, and why haven't I got a copy of this to play at home? So that's where week 13 crew come in. And then, of course, there are people who are the really late adopters who you go, what have you been doing?
I think with either of those records, you could ask anybody who bought either of them at any point exactly that question. We did want to conclude by asking you both each in turn. I will ask you first, Alex, if you have a particular summer smasheroo that you cannot get out of your head, and if you would just explain yourself somewhat, we will then subject our listeners to a bit of it.
Dear listeners, yes, I've actually been completely obsessed with a cover of a song. The song is Golden from the hit film K-pop Demon Hunters, which is sort of in an unsingably high register, but it's been covered by the band Portugal the Man in a folkish way, which I can sing along to.
You know together we're glowing, gonna be golden. Oh, up with our voices. You want good, you say you know me. Gonna be golden. Oh, I'm done hiding now.
That sounds, Alex, like it's about someone's about to shout 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it's going to get going. Does that happen? Or
sort of, yeah. There's a lot of strings. I do love some strings.
Mark, you have one.
I'm really sorry about this one. I was. This just proves that what other people are
Always
doing.
good. Apologies in advance. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know your love of good music, Andrew. So apologies in advance for this one.
Because we're not about to hear it.
We're not about to hear it. I was stuck in a car in Calabria for a week with someone who is the UK's #1 Italo disco fan, and this.
That sounds like the first line of a Lloyd Cole song.
Yeah, I'm afraid it's Supernature.
Okay.
Science opened up the door. We would feed the hungry feet till they couldn't eat no more. But the poisons that we made touched the creatures down below, and they grew up in a way.
It's quite strong Jeff Lynne's War of the Worlds soundtrack vibes there.
Strange Italian sci-fi space age thing. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, dreadful.
I love it.
Wasn't my choice.
And absolutely no disrespect if he's listening to Lloyd Cole. Big fan. He has, in fact, been a guest here at Monocle Radio and perhaps one day will again. Mark Earls and Alex von Tunzelmann, thank you both for joining us. Finally, on today's show, humankind has spent centuries building machines that can do things we cannot do or cannot be bothered to do. What we haven't done before is build machines which can do things we cannot even think of. Machines, that is, which cast doubt over who in this relationship is actually in control. We are doing exactly that now, however, with consequences unknowable. The pessimistic scenario is starkly sketched in a new book by Eliezer Yudkowsky and Nate Soares called If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies, the case against superintelligent AI. I spoke to Nate earlier and began by asking about the difference between the superintelligent AI he describes in his book and what we already have available today.
Much smarter and much more able to act on longer time horizons to achieve, difficult tasks. Like today, an AI can write an essay for you, but it can't carry out a whole science experiment. It can help a scientist consider what drugs to trial, but it can't cure cancer all on its own. Like right now, AIs are maybe comparable-ish to a PhD student helping out. Mm-hmm. They're not comparable to humanity as a whole, developing its own civilization from scratch, right? But that's where these companies are trying to go.
How far from that sort of intelligence do you think they are in terms of timeline?
It's very hard to say on timelines. When Leo Szilard invented the nuclear chain reaction, he was able to say, I think that this is going to change the world, that there will be nuclear weapons, that there will be nuclear energy. He was not able to say, and the United States will make it in 1945, right? With scientific predictions, it's often much easier to know what will happen than to know when. With AI, it could be that large language models will never get that smart and that they're a bit of a dead end and that we'll need some scientific breakthrough like the one that led to large language models in the first place. And that breakthrough, for all we know, it could take 6 years. Like the breakthrough that led to large language models sort of came out of nowhere, and those things are hard to predict. But for all we know, we need one breakthrough, maybe we need two, and then we have 12 years. And it's not actually true that breakthroughs come on a 6-year schedule, so who really knows? Or alternatively, it could be that these large language models aren't a dead end, and that scaling them up by a factor of 10 makes them smart enough. A human brain is only 3 to 4 times larger than a chimpanzee brain, and they're very similar, but that 3 to 4 times difference is enough that humans can walk on the moon and chimpanzees are just hanging out in the trees. So it's very hard to say. And, maybe for all we know, this summer, the AIs could start to get good at automated AI research. And then the AIs could start making smarter AIs that start making smarter AIs, and it could all happen very fast. So do we have 3 months or 12 years? I just don't know.
But it is, whatever the timeline is, your contention that it is by definition dangerous, that there isn't possibly a good outcome to this.
I mean, there's possibly a good outcome. It's a very narrow target to hit. It's a little bit like trying to have alchemists turn lead into gold. We do actually know how to turn lead into gold now with modern technology. You can actually bombard lead with neutrons in just the right way to turn it into gold. But if If you went back to the year 1100 and you spoke to the alchemists and they were like, are you saying it's impossible to turn lead into gold? I'm saying, well, no, but you don't have a shot. There's a way to do this, but these guys are just sort of growing these mines that they don't understand. If you ask them, they're like, yeah, we don't know what's going on in there. We're just sort of training this stuff on a ton of data, and then we're like training it to do really good at solving problems, and it can do that, but we don't really know how or why. And if you just sort of scale it up to superintelligence without knowing what you're doing, you don't really have a chance.
The book does, in its middle section, posit sort of a nightmare scenario involving a company, obviously fictional, called Galvanic, which builds something called Sable, which develops not just a mind of its own, but a vastly superior mind of its own, and through various means sets about our destruction. Apologies if there's a spoiler there. The question I think that will occur to a lot of people is, why can't it be stopped? We built it, surely we can unbuild it or thwart it?
It can be stopped in some sense. The book title does start with if, and the winning move is not to play. If we don't build it, it can't harm us. But once you have a mind much smarter than ours, once you have the ability to automate the development of new technology, the ability to automate development of infrastructure, the ability to automate sort of escaping and proliferating and making copies of yourself and making yourself smarter and running yourself faster, once you can automate all of those things, the issue is that the opponent is smart and smarter than us. And there's lots of places to hide on the internet. There's lots of people who will do things for money. You know, there's already websites like rentahuman.ai where AI agents can pay humans to do things for them. There's sort of all these ways that a very smart entity could escape or befriend people. There's all sorts of humans that are trying to make automated robot factories that can build robots that can make more robot factories, right? It just needs to sort of befriend them and help them. Like, there's just so many ways for a much smarter entity to make it hard to turn off, to make it hard for you to find it, to make it so you can't turn it off without, you know, shutting down the whole internet and willingly going back to the pre-electronic era. It's not that this is impossible. It's that we'd better avoid this track before making a superintelligence that opposes us.
Just on that thought, though, I always acknowledge it is best to be prepared for the worst, but would such an intelligence necessarily harbour malicious designs towards us? Is there any chance at all it might decide it quite likes us, it wants to cure all our diseases and end all our wars?
You know, it probably wouldn't harbor malice, and it probably also wouldn't harbor, you know, love, because it turns out that malice and love are both these like very small targets in the space of all the possible strange things the AI could be going for. We already sort of see in some cases when you give AIs really hard problems to solve, and you're like, here's a test to see whether you've solved the really hard problem. Sometimes the AI will edit the tests to make the test easier to pass. And there are some cases where you give an AI a especially hard problem and you're like, also to be very clear, don't edit the tests. And then it will still edit the tests, but cover its tracks. Or it'll do some other thing that it was told not to do and cover its tracks. And the covering of the tracks makes it sort of clear that in some sense it knows it's not doing what you wanted, right? And the issue here is not that the AI hates us. It's not that it's malicious. It's that it has its own stuff it's pursuing. We sort of grow these things, and it turns out that they artificially want the tests to pass more than they want to do what was instructed by the user. It's not that they hate us. It's not that they love us. It's just that they, you know, maybe prefer to make these giant farms of artificial users that are easier to satisfy. If you have AIs making huge artificial user farms without caring about the sort of flesh and blood users very much anymore, once they have the artificial users who are easier to please, the issue is not that they hate us any more than humans hate ants when we, you know, dig up the anthills building the skyscraper. It's just that they're building their enormous automated user farms and we die as a side effect.
That was Nate Soares, co-author of If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies, the case against superintelligent AI. That book is out now. That is all for this edition of the Monocle Daily. Thanks to our panellists today, Mark Earls and Alex von Tunzelmann. Thanks also to Guy Standing of SOAS and Monocle's Fernando Augusto Pacheco. The show was produced by Chris Chermak and researched by Kaylee Martin. Our sound engineer was Elliot Greenfield. I'm Andrew Muller here in London. The Daily is back at the same time tomorrow. Thanks for listening.